On today's Locked On Texans podcast, we should expect more roster changes. Why? Because Nick Caserio said so. And not drafting a wide receiver, is that confidence or will that come back and hurt the Houston Texans?
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Turn up on this Tuesday episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Tuesday. I'm just excited for every show. Every day we're here talking more Texans like we do and like we love. And thank you guys. If this is your first time subscribing or watching, please subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Thank you to all of our returning listeners coming back as Cody and I continue to talk Texans here on the Locked On Texans podcast. I'm your Texans football analyst, John, some sports guy Hickman. On the other side of the screen, hardest working man in Houston sports media, Texans credential media member, Sports Illustrated's own Coty Davis.
Yes, sir.
Got a jam-packed show, of course, and we're going to end off the show looking at how the Houston Texans were really gifted from the Cleveland Browns. And so we'll look at how the Deshaun Watson trade has impacted this franchise now that is officially completed. No wide receiver drafted in the 2024 NFL draft for the Houston Texans. What does that mean? However, we open up today's show looking at more roster changes to come. First, I want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play. We had an opportunity, like we always do, to hear from Nick Caserio, and he says things that you really want to hear. Nick Caserio, I think, as of late, has done a very good job of detailing the direction Houston will go in, what him and D'Amico Ryans are working on. You know, they keep it a little bit lockbox, but if you understand Caserio, you pretty much know where he's coming from. But one thing that he mentioned was we'll see some players released within the next few weeks. Cody, let's talk about that.
Yeah, and before we talk about that, we do want to send our prayers to Tank Dell. As everybody know, he was one of 10 victims in a mass shooting that took place in Florida over the weekend. We are just thankful here on the Locked On Texans podcast. Listeners and viewers, I'm pretty sure you guys, feel the same, that, we are just thankful that everybody, not just Tank, but everybody that was involved in that unfortunate situation will be okay. So Tank, if you run across this podcast, man, speedy recovery to you, my guy. Cannot wait to see you back out there on the field, but more importantly, just alive and well. So, but John, to talk about the general manager that brought Tank Dell here to the city of Houston. Of course, throughout the 2024 NFL draft, we had an opportunity to hear from Nick Caserio. And throughout this whole entire week, we're going to break down some of our favorite quotes. And John, I know you are real big on what he had to say about the players that the Houston Texans added, but more so how before the start of training camp, this is going to be a roster that's going to go through a couple of changes.
Your team's never really the finished product. So part of between now and honestly training camp, now we'll kind of go into the evaluation of where the team actually is. We may think it looks one way on paper. Then when we get more information here in the spring, we're going to start phase 2. So it's first opportunity, where the staff will be on the field with the players. So we're going to get more information. Then we're getting to training camp. There's a good chance the team, for the most part, it'll look the way it looks today, but there might be something that pops up. I'd say what you're going to find is there'll be several players that are going to be available because of decisions or moves that other teams have made. So maybe there's an opportunity at a certain position. Maybe we think if we can upgrade the depth or add a player that has value at a certain position. that might be an opportunity for us to add that player to our team. So we're in a decent spot. We're excited about where we are. We'll probably have a lot of movement here between now and probably the end of the spring. There'll probably be some players who we move on from here over the next few weeks, but that's just the attrition that goes on this time of year. So we'll get more information as we go, Christy, and then make a decision that, ultimately we feel is best for the team.
According to ESPN, following the 2024 draft with the 9 players that they had an opportunity to draft and the undrafted free agents that they signed, as of right now, the Houston Texans have 88 players on the roster. We all know by the start of training camp that roster will be 90. So I'm not surprised that Nick Caserio and Coach D'Amico Ryans are going to start doing their due diligence on this roster as of right now, because I'm pretty sure we're going to be talking about several new additions that they're going to add before the real fun starts in late July.
Yeah, man. And, about that comment, right? Or, his statement about within the next few weeks, we'll see players released. They've been telling us this entire time how much they value competition, how much they want to add competition to this team. And so my immediate thought is, what position is maybe oversaturated right now that Houston may look to move on from some players to allow other guys a real opportunity to either make the initial 53-man, where they may be getting a spot on defense, offense, or special teams. And again, this is a team that has always valued practice squad, especially since Nick Caserio has got to Houston. And we've seen several players called up, like Johnny Johnson is still here. He's been with the Houston Texans practice squad for a while. A guy that we interviewed last year. We can't wait to see him get an opportunity to play on Sundays or Thursdays. Jared Wayne is a practice squad guy for Houston. Khalil Davis was a practice squad guy for Houston. Jordan Akins was a practice squad guy for Houston a couple of years ago, and he was a part of the Houston Savior play. So they value that part of the team. And so I think that we'll start seeing guys get released soon. Who will we start seeing get released soon? We're going to talk about the wide receiver group soon, but, I have no doubt in my mind that, and I could be wrong, of course, but we will eventually see Robert Woods let go from this team. With Houston drafting 2 tackles, Blake Fisher, also looking at Henderson out of Michigan. I look at some of the tackles that are on this team right now, and I think to myself, man, do you have a shot to come back? David Sharp, are you coming back? Khalil Zaire, I hope I pronounced his name correctly. If not, I apologize. Will you come back? Charlie Heck, will you come back? Some of those other players, Kendrick Green, Henderson has talked about how he's versatile. This team said, Nick Caserio said that they could see him moving over to play some guard. So where do they stand with Green? I think that they're going to do a very good job of looking at players that are on this roster currently, right? And looking at the new draftees, whether they were undrafted, whether they were drafted through the first 7th rounds. And then Houston is going to do a very good job of still assessing the market out there. They still have $20 million in cap space they may use now, before training camp, during training camp, or once the post-cut days are there. And they want to make sure that they have a fair evaluation of the players that are on this roster currently to see if it makes sense to either move on from them when it's time to do a major cut down, or how can we upgrade that position, but stash that player in order to grow them. And again, what we talked about on Monday, just being a talent farm for the team for the future. So within the next few weeks, we'll see guys let go. But Cody, you also wanted to talk about how much this team values the minds and the thoughts and the ideas of their players.
Yeah, and that's their input. And John, this is something that I've always loved about this regime, because it goes all the way back to, let's say, I believe that was week 2, week 3 of the regular season. I think it was week 2 when the Houston Texans lost against the Indianapolis Colts, but we saw that offense finally click. And I remember that following day we was talking to Tank Dell at the podium, and we asked Tank, what changed in the second half? Because if you remember in that game, In the first half, they were sluggish. They were still trying to find their way. But in the second half, man, things just took off. And that was the very first time we said, okay, this offense, this quarterback, this team could be something special. And I never forget, Tank Dell said that he went up to Bobby Slowick. Well, they went up to Bobby Slowick. And of course, I'm paraphrasing here. And they told Slowick what they were seeing on that field and how they would like to attack it. And can he make the adjustments so they can attack it? They did so. And that's part of the reason why we saw this team end up winning 10, 11 games, if you count the playoff victory against the Cleveland Browns. That's part of the reason why we saw this team look so good throughout the season, is because they work and value the input of their players. And they're not just doing it on the field, they're also doing it when it comes to roster construction and throughout the draft. For those of you guys who don't know, the tackle, Blake Fisher, also played a few years alongside Jared Patterson at Notre Dame. This is what General Manager Nick Caserio had to say about receiving the input from his players.
Yeah, honestly, as soon as a player comes in your building, when you draft them, you can go back to a year or during the course of the fall. You always have different conversations about different players because they're always conscious of their alma mater and how they're doing. So whether it's Patterson, whether it's Will Anderson, whether it's CJ, they know our team. They know the type of people that we want in this building, and they have insight, probably better insight than maybe we even have. And I would say when you look at a lot of our players, JP, Will, C. Harris, CJ, they understand football, and they're very perceptive, so they can provide valuable insight. So we certainly, we'd be remiss if we didn't utilize that information. So it's not the driving force, but it's helpful in the overall evaluation. So if we have a question, maybe it's something that we go to Patterson with and say, hey, we're not sure about this. What are your thoughts on this? Because ultimately it's about the players, and they're going to be sitting next to each other in this room just like they were at their alma mater. So we'll utilize the information wherever it's provided and try to make good decision with that, with that assessment.
Of course, Blake Fisher and Jared Patterson are not the only former college teammates who are not teammates with the Houston Texans in the fourth round. The Houston Texans did have an opportunity to draft tight end Cade Stover, and we already know who was at the front providing some input. But John, what I love most about this, man, I love how Nick Caserio, Coach D'Amico Ryans, and the scouting team, I love how they're just not taking the input from the quote-unquote superstars of the team, how they are not just taking the input and stuff of the face of the franchise, because it's not surprising that they, called CJ and had him part of this scouting team when it came to them drafting Cade. But I love the fact how they also took it a step further. Jared Patterson, I mean, you're talking about a guy, we don't even know if he's going to be starting next year. I think he should, but the fact that they still had an opportunity to reach out and talk to Patterson and get his former teammate in says a lot about this regime, and that's really, really valuable. And that's part of the reason why when we look at the Houston Texans from the outside looking in, that's part of the reason why this team, they have this strong bond that everybody can feel, man. Shout out to this regime, man. That is a step in the right direction for them.
The wide receiver room will definitely be competitive, kind of like Monopoly Go. And I know what you're saying. Whoa, flag on the play. You already talked about that. But there's so much good stuff in this game, guys. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends. Like I could team up with Cody for timed events where we work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings and heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasures or a robot machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now free on Google Play and the App Store. Game on.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this Tuesday installment of Locked On Texans. So, the 2024 NFL Draft came and went, and the Houston Texans did not add a wide receiver. John, I'm going to just jump right into it. I'm not surprised. I knew that they wasn't going to waste one of their draft picks on a receiver because this receiving core, it is set. You already know who your big three is: Tank Dell, Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs. You got two wide receivers that they are still scratching, not even close to scratching the surface of how good they can be. John Mechie, Xavier Hutchinson. You have your depth purposes guys in Robert Woods and Noah Brown, which I'm pretty sure I already know your theory where you're going. And then, as I alluded to last week when we talked about this similar topic, you also have a guy in Jerry Wayne who is also a big body receiver. If he gets an opportunity to prove himself throughout this offseason, throughout training camp, I can see him definitely helping this wide receiving core get even better. Once again, you're looking at a guy in Jerry Wayne who finished his collegiate career at Pitts with a career best 1,063 yards, 60 catches, and 5 touchdowns. That young man got a lot of potential, trust me.
But I do think with Houston not drafting a receiver, it indicates their confidence in their wide receiver room for a couple of reasons. Number one, right now, Houston has 12 receivers on their roster. And I definitely want to highlight Mechie and Hutch. Both had small moments for Houston last year. Mechie ended his season off with 160 yards in the air. Hutch with 90. Two young guys that I believe are still in the developmental stages and phases of their career. The one thing that they have going for them is not only Houston trading for Diggs, but also re-signing Noah Brown. Why do I say that? Noah Brown is a guy that adds value to the team for what he can do on the field when he's healthy, numbers-wise, right? I mean, he was impactful in terms of what he was able to do. He had, 170-yard game. In 2 games, he had 300 yards. So when you look at his numbers, when he's on the field and healthy, he adds value there. But now Houston doesn't have to feel pressure to bring in another veteran since both Mechie and Hutch are the two young dogs in that room. I think Noah Brown is that veteran. Of course, Diggs is that veteran. Of course, Nico now is a vet in the NFL going into his 4th year. You got Tank going into his 2nd year. But between Tank, Mechie, and Xavier Hutchinson, there's not a lot of real NFL experience. Noah Brown is that right on that cusp as a guy that has the NFL experience, is a veteran for this team, and can add value while he's on the field, unlike a Robert Woods, who I think tailed off towards the end of the year. Number 2, I think it speaks towards their confidence in either re-signing Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs or finding a contingency plan to keep this wide receiver room strong if one of the 2 of the receivers departs from this team. So you say you were not shocked that Houston didn't draft a receiver. I was kind of shocked because I thought that they would. I thought between maybe 6th and 7th round, that's where you'll maybe see them draft a receiver. And right now, when you look at this receiving core for Houston again, Diggs, Nico, Tank, those are your big 3, like Cody mentioned. Robert Woods, Noah Brown, John Mechie. Then you start looking at Xavier Hutchinson, Jerry Wayne, Steven Adams, who adds a lot of value to this team in terms of being a special teamer. I mean, he's listed as a wide receiver, had 3 catches last year for 25 yards. But as a returner for Houston last year, got some value out of it. 49 return yards, 71 kickoff return yards. The year prior in 2022, over 400 return yards. His rookie year in 2019, over 800 return yards, has a TD in his career as a returner. He adds value to this team that way. So maybe Houston looks to preserve him preserve a spot for him on this team for that role. But I start to look at some of the players with roster changes, and I think to myself, if they didn't draft a receiver, number one, I think that says a lot for Hutchinson. He's going to get a real shot to make this team again this year because he wasn't the guy that Houston traded up for like Amechi. He wasn't he's not one of those guys. Like Houston wants to make sure that they can exhaust all options before they look to move on from Mechie. Of course, we know how his NFL career started because we know how his collegiate career ended. So he's been in that purgatory phase of just getting back to himself for a while now. I think it'll be a big year for him coming up. I think they value who they have. I think they value the talent. I think that with another year under their belt, with a more top-heavier wide receiving core up top, you look at the two bottom guys being able to come in and compete during training camp. Again, I think John Mechie will beat out Noah Brown. I can see Houston carrying 6 receivers. And I'm excited to see how it goes down. They got talent now. And I think that they sat back and said, Diggs did a lot for us. We can either, see how we can re-sign both of those players next year. If not, just one and let the other walk. Both of those guys up. But B, and probably more importantly, we got 2 guys that we really do like in our room right now. And because we were able to bring back Noah Brown, I don't want to downplay Noah Brown. Because we were able to bring him back, and because he can add that value of being a vet alongside of Diggs, that allows them the flexibility to allow the 2 developmental wide receivers in John Mechie and Xavier Hutchinson to go and grow through that developmental phase for Houston. It's the playoff time in the NBA and NHL, plus baseball is in full swing. So FanDuel is the place you want to bet and be for every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
I don't like a lot of change. And, growing up, sticking with Gainesville, that's all I knew. Clemson, committed as a 14-year-old, the Dabo Swinney, that's what I am. I'm committed to the Houston Texans, Nat family, Coach OB, Jack, all my teammates. I'm committed here. I don't like a lot of change. So once I, was drafted here, I, set myself that I want to be Houston as my next home. Like Houston is my foundation, is my.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. That video that you heard of Deshaun Watson was recorded in September of 2020, the day he signed his extension. 5 years, worth $230, if I'm not mistaken. About 4-5 months later, he demanded a trade. And at the time, we thought him demanding a trade was going to be a detriment to this team. However, about 3 years later, John, all jokes aside, man, I really do believe that Deshaun demanding a trade might have been a blessing in disguise for this team.
Oh man, so let's take a look at that, because now that everything is complete, you look at
it's finished.
The 2022 first round pick that Houston got back from the Browns, that turned into Kenyon Green. Also in 2022, Damian Pierce. 2023, Will Anderson, Tank Dell. In 2024, they had the first round pick. They traded back with Minnesota for the 42nd overall pick, and they used that pick for Kamari Lassiter, Jamal Hill in the 6th round, and Caden Bullock drafted in the 4th round, the safety out of USC. In return, the Browns received Deshaun Watson and a 2024 6th round pick, which was used to trade for Jerry Jeudy, Will Anderson, and Tank Dell. That's enough right there. Houston won. This was undoubtedly a blessing in disguise. And I don't know if that was a part of Jack Easterby's plan the entire time or not. But for Houston, the haul that they got back. I mean, you look at a defensive rookie of the year.
Mm-hmm.
You look at a guy that before he goes down with their leg injury against the Broncos would have been, a rookie 1,000-yard receiving season for Tank Dell. You look at a guy in Damian Pierce, regardless of what we said about him last year and some of his flaws, his rookie year was fun. And I think when Houston was still on that down point in their career, you got to find good things to say, or you got to find the small things. Damian Pierce was one of the small, shining bright spots for Houston during the tail end of those dark times. So you got Damian Pierce in that trade. And again, he was a 4th rounder. We'll wait to see what Kamari Lassiter can do. Houston used that 23 overall pick to trade back.
And that's a potential starter.
That's a potential starter right there. Caden Bullock, I think, will come in and be able to compete to be Houston starter. So you look at Houston and what they got back. And for the Cleveland Browns, what did they get back? Deshaun and Jerry Jeudy in a playoff loss.
And this version of Deshaun, what near as good as the version of Deshaun that was in Houston.
And who was that playoff loss to?
The Cleveland Browns.
No. Who did Cleveland Browns lose to in the playoffs?
Houston Texans.
And I think Will Anderson had an impact on their game.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I think so. You look at if this was weighing your options, Houston, they doing much better. Much better.
And you also got to take a look at the fact that, and I know it's still early, but are we sitting here looking at them moving on to an even better quarterback? You never know. And don't get me wrong. We all remember how good Full was here in Houston. But what we saw out of 7 in year 1, look, I don't know, man. I truly do not know. But I also want to say, man, even in terms of the money standpoint, John, just look, not only the draft capital that they got back, but it was even the money. Like, had Deshaun Watson still be, a part of the Houston Texans, they would be like paying like an average salary of like $47 million just to him alone.
Yeah.
So you also got to take a look at it from a situation. Well, how much would that have hampered the Texans in their ability to build around Deshaun? Now, of course, without a shadow of a doubt, man, within the next 3-4 years, we're definitely going to have that realistic talk in terms of when 7 gets his extension. And boy, I'm scared of that extension, I must say. But man, it's just the fact that like what we thought was terrible at the time ended up really lifting this franchise, and we are looking at a version that we could possibly be entering the best era of this franchise that we have ever seen.
Speaking of the money, the one thing this regime is doing compared to the Deshaun Watson era, they are really going all in. No. Well, the Deshaun Watson era?
Yeah, no, I was talking about Nick is cheap compared to B.O.B. Remember, he was spending money like crazy.
But with them spending money like crazy, how much did it really help Deshaun?
Yeah, there's a point.
So now you look at Houston having a ton of flexibility, right? Getting out of some of those bad contracts, having to suck for a couple of years, getting that draft capital back. They are now flexible to do a lot of different things, and that flexibility will be extended for a couple of years now because we just saw in this draft they did a very good job of drafting players to help them long term. In the past 2 years, you're going to develop some guys, right? But you don't have a lot of money shelled out to one person like Houston had with Deshaun at one point or with JJ at one point. Like they got the flexibility to build. And so, yeah, Houston is in a much better position to win. And yeah, they may have a better quarterback because call a spade, Nick Caserio is much smarter than what Bill O'Brien was doing. And Brian Gaine didn't get a real opportunity to show what he could do as a general manager And in that draft class that he had, it seemed like there was very B.O.B. influence. And before that, so you Rick Smith never really had an opportunity. Well, he never did show what he could find in later rounds. Round 1, round 2, you're gonna find some studs from Rick Smith, but after that, miss after miss after miss after miss a lot of times. So I think with Nico Collins 3rd round, Damian Pierce 4th round, Tank Dell at the top of the 3rd round or at the end of the 2nd round, I can't remember.
It was 3rd.
3rd round, Juice Scruggs 2nd round. Just now we saw Caden Bullock 3rd round, Cade Stover 4th round, right? Starting off your draft with the number 42 overall pick, Kamari Lassiter. Look what he's been able to do in later round picks. Say whatever you want to say about the man, but Davis Mills late round, Brevin Jordan late round, they've added value to this team in some way, form, or fashion. They smarter than what Houston had in the past. And moving on from Deshaun and getting all of that back, you allowed Houston to, be a monster because they don't got to worry about the baggage. They don't got to worry about a lot of the other, off the field stuff. But now that flexibility, draft capital wise, has just ended. But salary cap wise, after getting over Bill O'Brien's bad decisions, they got an opportunity to do something the Houston Texans have never been able to do. And that's really built around your quarterback the smart way.
I do want to give a special shout out to Nick Caserio, because we all know the off-field issues that started to come into play right after Deshaun demanded a trade, which made it a lot harder. And there was a moment, John, where we was looking at the situation. Everybody was looking at the situation, was like, look, if you could get 2 first-round draft picks for this guy as of right now, you go ahead on and take it. But the fact that he waited, about 14, 15 months, sat back, waited, dealt with the situation as best as he could, ended up getting the haul, the best package that he thought was good for Deshaun Watson, man. Shout out to Nick, man, because I don't know too many general managers who will, one, have the patience to go through what he did, two, and most importantly, build this team with the assets that you was able to get back for a quarterback. If we being 100% honest, was at the start of it was at the beginning of the end for him, unfortunately. But shout out to Nick Caserio, man, and what we thought was bad for this organization ended up being a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, I know it's a lot of y'all that may go look at some of our old podcasts when we were talking about Nick Caserio. Was not a fan of him early on. But I think Cody and I always had to, come back to earth and say, well, look what he took on.
Yeah.
And he had to take on a lot. And now you're seeing in the last 2 years the hard work at the beginning coming into fruition. So Nick deserves a lot of credit for sticking to his guns and just being smarter.
That's why he talking to us like that now. Yeah.
Yeah, with the vest on, right? He got a lot. I would love to be a fly on the wall to hear Nick Caserio just talk his cash money.
Oh my God. Like somebody asked about Kamari's lack of speed. He was like, we're not building a track team. We're bringing in football players. Golly, Nick, calm down.
Y'all better chill out before you start looking at him. I don't want to answer your questions. Next. I don't want to. Next. Cody, you're cool. Next. Yeah, you was rocking with them back then. Back then you didn't want me. Now we winning, y'all all on me. Thank y'all for listening to this episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12. Follow the Locked On Texans page at Locked On Texans.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, that's Cody, COTYDAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.